And joining us now on the debate, Bill Blair, Chief of Police for the Toronto Police Service. Paulette Senior, CEO at YWCA Canada. John Evers, Regional Director of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. And Greg Farron, Manager of Government Affairs and Policy at the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. And once again this season, we call this and every Thursday Your Agenda Thursdays, because we invite you to join the discussion. You can reach us by email at theagenda@tvo.org, on Twitter at twitter.com, #YourAgenda, or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/theagenda. And our fifth column blogger, Mike Miner, is hosting a live chat on our Inside Agenda blog on our homepage, tvo.org/theagenda. Hi there, Mike. You can log in there, join your fellow viewers in that way too. So please jump in, join the debate, and we'll get your comments and questions up on the screen throughout the program. Okay, good to have everybody on the program tonight. We're glad you could all come in. Let us just, in the hopes of, because there are, from what I've been able to glean so far, there are few even facts, let alone opinions, that everybody around this table agrees upon. So let's see what we can do just with a bit of a timeline here. Michael Smith, if you would, let's bring this up. Here's the history of gun control in Canada. We're going to do it in a minute. 1934, federal government begins the permanent registration of handguns. That practice continues today and is separate from the long gun debate. Registering a firearm identifies a gun and links it to an individual. Fast forward, December 6, 1989, we all remember this. École Polytechnique, the shooting resulting in the deaths of 14 women. There were calls for increased gun control in its wake. 1991, Bill C-17 is passed. It creates a licensing system similar to what we have today, requiring gun owners to complete safety training courses and have background checks. 1995, Bill C-68 receives royal assent. That created the Long-gun Registry for guns such as rifles and shotguns. It was expected to cost $119 million, and it was expected that almost all of that would be paid by long gun owners themselves. Well, February 2004, media reports put the cost of the Long Gun Registry actually at $2 billion. May 17, 2006, the Harper government introduces a one-year amnesty on unregistered long guns, and that amnesty has been renewed every subsequent year to this day. June 19, 2006, the Harper government introduces a bill to do away with the Long Gun Registry. That bill died on the order paper after Parliament was prorogued. Several other attempts to abolish the Long Gun Registry are tried and fail. However, May 15, 2009, backbench Conservative MP Candace Hepner from Manitoba. She introduces a private member's bill to abolish the Long Gun Registry. That's Bill C-391, and that one is scheduled for its third reading on September 22nd, and that, I think it goes without saying, will be a rather dramatic vote. Let's go around the table here and just get a sense of where you all are on this issue. Paulette, let's go to you first. Has the history of gun control, in your view, in this country, been moving in the right direction?
I think it has, and I think it has through the perspective of looking at the registry as a tool that has been quite effective in being able to provide support to the police to address and prevent violence against women in Canada. And that's not just in terms of the rural-urban divide, as you have so ably put at the beginning of the program, but I think it's more having to do with just safety for all Canadians. And so no matter where we are in this country, we know that it's an important tool that is used every day, thousands of times, to prevent issues that could happen in the homes.
John Evers, your view.
Well, you missed an important facet in your opening remarks there. 1978 was the introduction of the FAC system. That's what we should go back to, is a licensing system only. That worked, it was functional. The registry is a complete waste of time, space.
FAC?
Firearm Acquisition Certificate. It was a license to acquire a firearm, and that was back in 1978 that was introduced. And that's what I'd like to go back to, is that sort of a system.
Because you think that worked well?
I know it worked well,
okay.
And can actually work better with more money spent on it, more in computer systems, it can be done.
Do you want to make the distinction between registering and licensing?
That's the critical part, and that's where there's a lot of disinformation from some of the proponents of the registry. They always shade it within topics of licensing. We need names. Names is licensing, it's not registration. Registration is objects.
So you license people, you register
exactly.
Weapons, guns.
Anything, you register any objects.
Okay. Go ahead, you follow up. I think we're going in the right direction in this country as it relates to gun control.
No, I don't. And the reason I don't think that is it's been quite definitive. If you look at the Auditor General's reports in 2002 and 2006, she was very definitive, not only about the costs. I mean, originally this system was supposed to cost $2 million. Well, you know, you see where we are today, 1,000% cost overrun.
It's supposed to cost taxpayers $2 million.
That's correct.
The $119 million would be borne by those
That's
who had
correct.
to buy the registrations.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, now we're $1.5 billion or $2 billion, depending on who you believe, and counting. You know, as a taxpayer, you've got to be appalled by that. Worse still is the fact the Auditor General found that the Canadian Firearms Centre could not justify the fact that the system had enhanced public safety or saved lives. And those were the two premises on which Bill C-68, which included the long gun registry, were born. If they haven't been able to definitively prove that, and there is no empirical study anywhere that has shown that the long gun registry saves lives, then why do we continue to waste money on this?
If anybody would know the answer to that question, it's the next guy. And in fact, we just had somebody make a contribution to the program whose comments were up on the screen there saying, give me a specific example of how the existence of the long gun registry made us safer. Chief.
I can give you countless examples, Steve, and each and every day, right across this country, there are situations that the police are called to, situations that are dangerous, situations where there's domestic violence taking place, situations where people are emotionally disturbed or suffering from mental illness. And when the police go into that situation, they are able to determine not only that an individual may be licensed, which is important information, and I certainly support the licensing system, but by checking the firearms registry, we are able to get information about firearms that are actually possessed in that home, how many, and their type and their serial numbers. And it's an important starting point. It's not all of the information we need, but it's an important starting point in those investigations. The responsibility of the police in responding to those situations, which have happened countless times each and every day right across this country, is to render that situation safe. We are able to deal with the people involved, but by removing firearms from that situation, we can make it safer.
How does it help the officer who's responding to let's say, a domestic call to know that there are guns in the home?
First of all, one of the things that can be done for that officer is his dispatcher will run the address to determine if there is, first of all, a licensed firearms owner in that house, and determine how many firearms are registered to that individual. That knowledge can help that police officer determine the safest way to approach that situation. When we go into that situation, and when it's required that we want to make it safe, the wife may be aware, for example, he's got a shotgun up in the closet, but we can determine through the registry that he may possess many more weapons. We'll certainly do a search of the house, but that search will not be concluded until we're certain we've got all the weapons that are registered to that individual. The knowledge of what weapons a person has and can do a number of things that help us make that situation safe. It helps us identify the weapons that are to be removed from the house. The registration system also creates a system of accountability for firearms ownership. And you know, the people often say, prove to me where, you know, this saved a life. But when an individual is responsible for a gun, if you buy a firearm, if you're properly licensed and you buy a firearm, and you register that firearm, you're responsible for it.
Okay,
you're responsible for its safe storage, its safe use, and its appropriate disposition.
Let's get some of the feedback from the other side of the table.
I have to disagree with the chief there, with all due respect, because that, you know, the scenario he's describing, sure, if the officer goes into the registry, or if the dispatcher goes into the registry, and if there is somebody in that household that has registered a firearm, then that may help the police when responding to that call. The problem is that there's a high rate of non-compliance. There's a high rate in the system of inaccuracies and inconsistencies in there.
If you're a cop responding, you never know.
So if you're a police officer responding, and we've had thousands of officers comment on this fact, you know, recently in a Blue Line poll and other polls. There was even remarks in the RCMP report, which I'm sure will come up tonight, about the inconsistencies and inaccuracies of the system. So if you're a police officer, you check the registry, it says no firearms present. Can you be sure that the person in there doesn't have a firearm? No, you can't, because you don't know if they have one and didn't register, and you don't know if it's a criminal.
Stand by, John. I'm going to get back to you, John, but I presume the cop on the beat doesn't have 100% faith in this system to approach a house and not assume there was a gun there, right? They assume there's a gun there regardless, don't they?
Let's clarify something very early in this. Greg made reference to a poll. I think that was a very generous term to apply to what was released by an officer who happens to own a gun store out in Edmonton. The reality was that poll was not done through Blue Line magazine. Blue Line has disavowed any relationship to it. and in fact, the most unscientific, and there's absolutely no way to determine its veracity. I've heard from a number of large polling agencies who were outraged that anyone, including the government, would call
Let's say
this a
the
poll.
poll stinks, but is it not fair to say that every cop who approaches a home for whatever the situation is assumes there's a gun in that house?
No, that's, you know, there's one thing about knowledge, about an assumption that a gun may be present. And police officers will, I've been a cop for 34 years, and I've got 8,000 of them working for me. And I represent, as the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police president, police services right across this country. And I can tell you, police officers are checking that database of over 12,000 times a day. They use that database in the conduct of their investigations. They don't consider it absolutely definitive. They're still going to approach a situation with caution. But the knowledge that the registry provides them with is a great assist.
John,
in helping
what about
them do their
that?
investigation.
Great
Two points
assist.
that Bill's got coming out here are incorrect. One, Steve, I'm going to assume for argument's sake that you do not have a firearms license. Would that be correct?
You are correct.
Okay. Let's call this a firearm. My firearm, registered to me under this great billion-dollar system. Bill, can this gun be at his house?
Can your
Can
gun
my firearm be
at
at
my
his
house?
Yes, it can.
Yes, it can. You're going to check that registry when he has domestic abuse case. Well, not that you ever do
Please,
that.
please, find another example.
And you're going to check the registry, and this is going to say that no, there are no guns present in your home, yet all of mine are there legally.
Because it's your gun, but
It's
in
not
my
registered
home.
to an address. There's no address tied to the non-registered registry, which is why we have the lies coming forth about we're checking this registry 12,000 times a day. That, my friend, is not correct. That's misinformation. The correct answer is 20. The 12,000 comes from automated computer checks, computers talking to computers back and forth. You actually go on the RCMP website and check it out, look at it. It asks approximately 9,000 are name checks. A name check is not a registry check, that's a licensing check.
Let's see if we can just agree on some facts here. Is what he's saying accurate?
No.
What's inaccurate
In
about
fact,
what he's saying?
the police in Canada check names about 93 million times a year.
That's licensing.
And the registry is not checked against those 93 million checks. There are a number of police services, and mine included, that have chosen to include a registry check and a universal address check. So if we're going to an address or we're making an inquiry about an address, we will check a number of different databases, including the firearms registry, because the information contained in there is valuable. The RCMP have also said, and police chiefs and police officers right across this country have said, this tool will become even more valuable if there is a greater level of compliance. And we need to find ways to encourage compliance.
Well, let me follow up with Paulette on that. The loophole that John appears to have identified here, namely somebody else can have their guns at somebody else's home, does that render this tool, as the chief has called it, much less effective than it might otherwise be?
I would disagree. And the reason I would disagree is because for the YWCAs, particularly in those rural communities, which is the issue that we're discussing tonight, we're really looking at the rural communities where long guns really are part of the culture. And so whether it's in Yellowknife, whether it's in Sudbury, whether it's any rural communities across Canada, what our YWCAs are telling us is that when women are put in situations of vulnerability or when there is an issue of domestic violence in the home, what they're experiencing is whether it could be intimidation, it could be threats, if not fatalities. And so they're concerned that if this tool becomes something that the police is not does not have availability to, then the threat in the home actually becomes even more pronounced.
I totally appreciate that position, Paulette, but tell me, if my guns are in somebody else's home, then there's no record of it at the home that the police may be responding to. So how useful is that thing as a tool then for them anyway?
I actually think there are cases where it has worked. And so I'm not an expert in terms of the actual registry itself. But what I can tell you that there are cases where women have told us that because the police were able to come to their homes and actually not just remove one gun, but there's an example of 21 guns that were actually removed from the homes, then they felt safer. And so the fact that they can actually rely on the police as a partner in order to address some of the issues that they're concerned with and remove those guns from the home becomes a very important tool.
Makes them feel more secure.
Absolutely.
Okay, Greg, you wanted to say.
Well, John is quite right. Under the Firearms Act, firearms do not have to be stored where they're registered. So a police officer can at any time be approaching a house where it shows no firearms present, and that is a problem. But secondly, I just want to respond to something that Chief Blair said, and again, I say this with all due respect. This issue that we keep hearing about, the police use it 10,000 times a day, 12,000, 14,000, the numbers bump up and down. One of his colleagues in the CACP, the chief of police of the city of Ottawa, last week took umbrage with those numbers. And Chief White said, look, I don't buy this. That's what his words were. I don't buy this. He said, when you go into the CPIC system, the police information system, it automatically generates and it pings into all the data banks. And the chief said, I'm not looking for specifics on the registry. I didn't ask to go into the registry. It just does it automatically. So it's very misleading to use that figure in terms, and if you look at the CFC website, the Canadian Firearms Centre website, it actually breaks down how many are names, addresses, registry, licensing, etc. And what John is suggesting is quite true. Specific registry inquiries are very, very tiny, and they've been going down since 2002.
If this thing is as useless and as bad as you say it is, then why are the police chiefs defending it so much?
Follow the money. It's always the way it is.
What does that mean?
They have budgetary requirements. They're getting, the RCMP right now getting $100 million in their budget to offset this firearms registry. The CAPC, being a lobby group, they get funding from CGI, a big corporate sponsor and a computer contractor for the registry. It's politics. It's not public safety, it's pure politics.
Got to let the chief respond to that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The statement that he just made is not only offensive, it's simply not true. Apparently, CGI, which is large systems integrator, which was hired by the federal government to do some work on the gun registry about a decade ago, did at one time sponsor an event at a conference. I didn't attend. A number of years ago. I was not in the executive of the CACP. We have no business relationship with them. The federal government does. But they've seized on this. You know, I think there is an issue of money, and I think it's important to understand who is funding, you know, what political campaigns and where money comes from to support certain advocacies. But I can tell you.
Okay, wait a second. What does that mean? Explain what that just meant.
Well, there's a fair bit of money that flows into this country and flows into various political campaigns to advocate for certain positions. We do not do that. The police don't do that. We don't contribute to anybody's political campaigns.
You're being a diplomat here, Chief. You're saying you're basically saying these guys are funding the Conservative Party, and therefore.
Well, I'm not making any specific reference to anything.
He said into this country. He's saying offshore money.
But let's be clear here. The police chiefs in this country, not just the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, but there are provincial police chiefs associations in every province in this country, and from British Columbia to Newfoundland, they have all passed resolutions in support of the gun registry, including, by the way, the chiefs of police in Ontario, which includes Chief White, the chiefs of police in Alberta, the chiefs of police in Saskatchewan, and the chiefs of police in virtually every province. And exactly the same thing has happened with the police unions. The Canadian Police Association, municipal and provincial police unions right across this country have all passed resolutions in support of retaining the gun registry.
I see both the two figures. Okay, first, Greg.
I want to respond to that because you have police associations in Edmonton, in Calgary, in Saskatoon, in Winnipeg, in the Saskatchewan Federation of Police Officers, Manitoba Federation of Police Officers. They've all passed resolutions that say scrap it, that they don't trust it. And with all due respect to the chief again, you know, there's been a lot of talk lately about the CACP and this unanimous support for the registry that occurred at their recent meeting. I believe it was in Winnipeg, if I'm correct. And the question I'd like, Edmonton, sorry, thank you. The question I'd like to ask the chief is, nobody seems to know what was the question that was posed to the CACP membership on the floor. What was the question that they were asked that they unanimously supported? And I'd appreciate if you could tell us what that was.
Certainly.
Go ahead.
There was a resolution for a national firearms strategy. We've had a national firearms strategy special purpose working group in the CACP with representation of police services right across this country and operational police officers as well. It made a resolution with respect to a number of aspects of a national firearms strategy, including support for the gun registry. It was put to a motion to adopt that as a resolution of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. There were over 300 people in the room. I read today somebody who wasn't in the room said there was 25 of us, but that simply is not true. And the resolution was put to the membership. It was an opportunity for discussion. There were two people that spoke on it. The chief of police in Edmonton spoke out strongly in favor of the gun registry and only spoke to the issue of the gun registry. The chief of police in Saskatchewan, Clive Wayhill, did exactly the same thing.
So are your facts wrong on this?
And then the matter was put to a vote as a resolution, and it's printed and published. It's available on our website if you want to read it. It was
okay, guys. At the risk of getting bogged down in a discussion about resolutions and conference, I want to get back to our
But it's
topic
very
tonight.
important what the chief has just said.
What's the point?
The firearms system, not the registry. The vote was not on the long gun registry. It was on the entire firearms system, and we have to be very clear about that because there's been a lot of misinformation suggesting that the CACP vote was to maintain the registry. It was to maintain the system of which the registry is a part. It wasn't. And I also just one last thing, if I might. The chief talked about all the organizations and associations of chiefs of police and whatnot across the country supporting this. I might also point out that the province of Alberta, province of Saskatchewan, province of Manitoba, and the territory of the Yukon, all of them, the governments of those provinces, not individuals, the governments have written to Ms. Hepner, the sponsor of C-391, supporting her bill to scrap the long-gun registry. So there's a real disconnect there between what the police may be believing and what the governments of those respective jurisdictions believe.
Well, this may get into some of the urban-rural divide here, because the total population of the provinces that you just identified, would it be 10% of the population of Canada?
I have no
That's
idea.
my guess. I mean, somebody will do the math for me and tell me I'm off by a bit, but my hunch is we've got, I mean, this kind of leads us nicely into the urban-rural divide here. But before we go there, Paula, you wanted to make one point.
Well, I think central, for clarification, is what is the big deal? What's the issue? Why would there be such a strong objection to registering as well as licensing? So you're licensing the owner, and you're registering what really is a lethal weapon.
This pen could be a lethal weapon.
So well, there are huge differences, but
I'm not nervous with that pen in your hand.
Thank you. Thank you. So,
Yeah.
so let's not muddy the issue. I think it's important to really understand what is the issue, because just like how you would drive a car, and you have to be licensed as a driver to drive a car. Someone has to say you're qualified, and the car also has to be registered.
What? What do you mean no?
My son could drive a car on the farm anytime he wants when he was 12, 8. Registration only applies when you go on the public highways.
Okay.
That's when registration license takes effect.
So
that's a tax grab to pay for the highway, which makes sense. And safety on the highway.
Let's just be clear.
What is the issue?
Let's get the answer to that question. Is it an issue of freedom? Is it a question of inconvenience? Is it a question of, what is it?
All of the above. It doesn't work. I'm a taxpayer. I want a safe society. I want money best spent where I think it'll do the best amount of work. And that is not the registry. It is licensing. It is background checks. It is women's shelters. It is mental health assistance. That makes sense. The registry is an abominable waste of money.
And Steve, there's the report here that's been done by a federal agency.
Tell everybody what that is.
I have in my hand the Canadian Firearms Program Evaluation. It's a report that was prepared by the RCMP for as part of the National Program Evaluation Services. It was done with independent oversight and evaluators as well. And one of the most important findings of this report is that the firearms program, including the registration of firearms, is a cost-effective and efficient program, which is promoting public safety and helping prevent crime. There's a great deal of information in there. It's one of the reasons we push so hard for this report to be made available. There are facts in here that refute some of the statements. It demonstrates quite clearly how this registration system is used by the police and the impact that it's had on public safety.
I have no doubt but that we could spend the next half an hour of the program going over that report alone, but we won't get to a lot of the things that I want to talk about tonight.
Because BP's doing a report on BP's oil spill, and BP thinks it was great. And the RCMP, it's the same thing.
Okay, point made. Let's move on. Can we bring this graphic up here, Michael? I want to show viewers a website that is trying to rally opposition to the long-gun registry. And this is a website called Scrap the Long-gun Registry, with the S in registry is $.ca. It provides information, quotes, YouTube videos that are supposed to discredit the long-gun registry. The site also tells you to contact Liberal or New Democrat MPs and let them know you want the registry abolished, because of course most of them are against that. None of the opposition MPs listed represents an urban constituency. They are all rural. If you go to the bottom of the page in very small font, you would have seen authorized by the registered agent of the Conservative Party of Canada. So my question is, okay, John, you get this one first. Is the government trying to exploit the urban-rural divide in this country by putting out websites on these kinds of things?
I think they're trying to exemplify what's going on here, that there's this subset of an urban-rural divide. I think it's an education divide. I think people who know about firearms are against the registry. The more you know about it, the more you see how useless it is. When you have people in the city that aren't experienced as much, their experience with firearms is violent crime in the streets with gangbangers. That is not the reality of the true Canadian gun system and the people, the society.
Paulette, do you think the government is trying to exacerbate the urban-rural split here with that kind of thing?
I think it is a false divide. And I think when you...
so you agree on that? You agree it's a false divide?
I think it is a... John, I beg to differ with that, so we don't agree on that. But no, I think it's a false divide in the sense that when you're talking about people's safety, it's all Canadians. And so the gun register really is a safety tool and it's very difficult to actually demonstrate prevention.
Do you think I don't want to save Canada?
I think you want to get rid of a very vital
Do you
tool.
think I don't want to save Canada?
John, I really don't know what you're up to.
No,
right?
that's a
I can't
question.
speak for you, and I refuse to speak for you. The point I'm making
I'll
is
ask you to speak for
it is
you.
it is important. You cannot speak for me. I think it is important that Canadians actually support a safety tool that is one of many tools that's being used to prevent people's lives from being taken. Not in terms of situations where, because I think one of the things that this side of your side of the argument uses is really talking about legal guns in terms of people who are not criminals. This is not about criminals or people who are not criminals. This is really about people wanting to have a safety tool that supports the safety of all people.
The law has 120 pages on me and 20 pages on criminals. It's totally out of balance. And I do want a safe society. I have children. My daughter's in university. My son's in the hall there. He's in high school. I want a safe society. I don't want them in jeopardy. I want a safe Canada. How can you not see that?
I think we want the same thing, and we want to use. And so why get rid of a tool that's actually in place to promote safety? Why would we want to do that?
Because it doesn't work. It can't work.
I think it is a mere inconvenience in comparison to saving people's lives.
But it doesn't save. In fact, the chief of
It's an inconvenience. It does save lives, and there are
jump in here
examples.
because you're both talking once. I want to jump in. Chief, help us out on this urban-rural issue. You represent obviously the biggest force in the country, service in the country. I know you like that better now. Is it possible that the view that you would bring to this would be dramatically different from the chief of police of a community of 1,000 people somewhere in Northern Ontario?
Well, and then let me talk about the chiefs in Northern Ontario who serve those rural communities. Just last week, the new commissioner of the OPP, Chris Lewis, came out very strongly in support of retention of the Drone Registry. It says it's an important public safety tool and it's an important officer safety tool for his officers. He says his members use it 1,600 times a day. They police rural areas in this province. The chief of police in Thunder Bay, the chief of police in Sudbury, North Bay, Timmins, have all come out very, very strongly in support of retention of the registry. They make very public statements in their communities because they believe this is a tool that helps them keep their communities safe. Police chiefs in Cornwall, Belleville, Kingston, Peterborough, Chatham, Wellington, Windsor, thank you, and police chiefs right across the GTA, of course, have all come out strongly in support of this tool because we see it as an effective and cost-effective. And by the way, I think it's really important to clarify the terrible misinformation about the billions of dollars that this thing would save by its elimination. It costs $4 million a year.
That's not.
Hang on. Let's no. Gentlemen, all we are going to be respectful of everybody's views here tonight.
I know, but I'm sorry. There's been a financial audit done according to Treasury Board guidelines in Ottawa of this program. The documentation is here in this report. You can laugh and you can deride the facts, but the facts speak for themselves. They're right there. That's the cost of the program.
It wasn't $4 million to set up.
No,
it might be $4 million annually.
And it wasn't $4 million. But listen, I don't support any kind of government misspending. But in 2006, the government made a very good move, and they put the RCMP responsible for the entire Canadian firearms program. And under their stewardship, the program has become far more effective, far more efficient, and far more economical. And the facts are there. They're there to be read.
I'm going to go to Mike Miner in just one second because while we're having this debate here in the studio, he's monitoring a debate online right now, and I want to find out what people who are weighing in online have to say about this. But is it fair to say, Chief, that the view of the chiefs would probably be diametrically different from the cop on the beat? My hunch is the guy on the beat doesn't like this.
Well, you know what, and your hunch is completely wrong.
I don't mean as a cop, I mean as a citizen.
No, I would ask you to just use a little common sense. What cop doesn't want information that he's going to use in a criminal investigation?
Again,
what cop,
not as a cop.
What real cop doesn't want information about...
Your officers in their civilian lives probably are not fans of this thing.
Well,
interestingly
enough, what we're seeing is as people become more aware of the efficacy of the system, when they become aware of some truth around this, that it's not billions, it's 4 million, when they learn that it's being used by the police and when they have a better understanding of how it's being used, even when we provide training for our police officers, we see a much stronger acceptance of its use, much more regular of its use, and much stronger support for its use. We've done that right across this country.
Again, though, I don't mean as a cop, I mean as a citizen. As a gun-owning citizen, my hunch is the average cop on the beat in his or her private life doesn't like this. Well, just like these guys don't like it. That's not such a stretch, is it?
I'm not a great fan every year of having to go and register my vehicle. It costs me money. It costs me even a little bit more money in the City of Toronto. Yeah. But there's a public safety interest in doing that.
Okay, stand by there, everybody. Stand by. I see you champing at the bit. I'll come right back to you. But in the meantime, Mike Miner has been watching what's going on online right now. Mike, come on in and give us your report.
Sure, Steve. I've been asking the people who've been chatting with us online where they're from and how strongly they feel about this issue. 82% of them have said that this is an issue that will affect how they're going to vote in a federal election. And as far as an urban-rural divide, the majority of these people, more than 80%, are living in an urban area, and this is a particular issue for them. They feel that there's a false wedge being made between urban and rural, and that there are a lot of people living in cities who really care about this issue, who have guns, and they reflect a lot of the things that people, like in Timmins last year at the agenda camp, I remember listening to a gentleman saying that he's often upset by the way that things are kind of portrayed aesthetically, as though people think he's a hick and just wants a gun so that he can go out and kill deer. And I've been hearing the same thing from people who live in major urban centers here in Ontario. But the overwhelming majority of people talking online in this chat are against it. And we have frontline officers. One man, Mark, says that there's a difference between written procedure and reality. He says that officers don't use this registry quite as much as possible. Another person named Peter, who's watching from the States right now, says that one of his concerns is that he registers the gun, a law changes, and something that he bought legally gets taken away from him. And that's been a fairly common sentiment as well.
Okay. Mike, I know you're going to keep monitoring the chat online, so thanks for doing that, and we'll check back with you later tonight if we've got some time. I want to, here's an example right out of left field, Paulette, but I did see Chuck Angus, the New Democrat member of Parliament, who I think may actually be changing his vote. Initially he was with you guys, now I think he's with you guys. But he did offer this example of the, I think, septuagenarian constituent of his, whose husband had died, who's got a bunch of guns in the house. And she doesn't want to give the guns away because they were his and they remind her of him. But by the same token, she's whatever, 78, 79 years old, and the hassle and expense of going out to get these things, you know, registered when she's never going to use them doesn't make a lot of sense to her and either to him.
Right.
What would you say to her?
I would say that's where the registry, the administration of the registry should kick in, because I think there is room for improvement and there's room for better communications, and I think there's room for a better way of working with people in situations or circumstances such as that. So I think if there was some sort of an outreach or communication strategy that the registry administrators would put in place to communicate in such circumstances, to say this is what you do if you're in that circumstance. Obviously this is someone who herself is probably not going to go out and utilize those weapons, but they could also be stolen and put in the wrong hands. And that's why the registry would be important in a circumstance like that. And they could be able to track them quite easily.
Greg.
I want to speak to the issues that Paulette's concerned about. She's concerned about spousal abuse and the potential for violence in the home. We have 400,000 people in this country that have prohibition orders against them for various reasons. Gun crimes, there's 36,000 persons with restraining orders against them, which presumably has something to do with domestic violence. These people, once the court issues a prohibition order, these people aren't tracked. The police don't follow up on these guys. And my question has always been, and I don't get this, frankly, instead of spending the huge amounts of money that have been spent, and it has been billions, not now, but the RCMP report certainly says it's $23 million a year, not $4, but regardless, instead of continuing to pour money into that system, which is inconsistent, inaccurate, and the Auditor General has said does not demonstrate that it's enhanced public safety or saved lives, why don't we take a page out of jurisdictions? Why don't we look at other jurisdictions like Baltimore, like New York City, like New Jersey, like Virginia, where these guys focus on the bad guys. They focus on that 400,000. Gun crime has gone down substantially because that's who they're looking at. These are the people who tend to commit crime using illegal firearms that are terrorizing communities.
So stop criminalizing what otherwise is legal activity.
Stop criminalizing the duck hunter, the farmer.
Okay. John.
You know?
John.
Back to the $4 million farce. If you do some simple math, there are some 750-odd thousand transfers per year within the system, restricted and non-restricted. Of that, let's say 200,000 are handguns restricted. They won't be touched by that question. You're left with 500,000 odd transfers per year. For each transfer, 3 articles of mail are sent out. One to the seller saying you're selling your gun. One to the buyer saying you're buying this gun. And then one saying here's your new certificate. 1.5 million transfers, letters sent out at 57 cents each. That's 1.5 million of his $4 million. He mentioned training. Nowhere in there are the training costs in. It's all hidden. Where's the amount of money spent by the Chief Firearms Office in Orillia for the Ontario portion of the registry? It's not in there. It's all hidden costs.
Okay, let me play some tape here. This is your hero. This is Candace Hepner, the Conservative MP who has sponsored this private member's bill to scrap the heroin, all right, to scrap the long gun registry, and she was testifying before a committee of Parliament. Michael, if you would, roll tape, please.
Doesn't everyone fear guns? Aren't all guns dangerous and to be feared? I don't believe so, Mr. Chair, and I have no doubt that is because I grew up in rural Canada. And in rural Canada, we do view firearms very, very differently than some would in urban Canada. Now, I will tell you this. I am very much afraid of guns if they are in the wrong hands. For example, if I were to walk onto any farmyard in my riding and the farmer would walk out of his barn and he would be holding a rifle in each hand, I would not be the least bit worried or concerned. However, if I'm walking home today to my condo in the city of Ottawa and I see someone walking around waving a gun, I would be very, very concerned. The difference is who is in possession of the firearm.
Okay, that's what she says. The real issue is here. You want to respond to that?
Well, I wanted to respond to an earlier point, so I could work that. I could work that in too. I could work that one in as well. But you know, I think the whole issue of you know, guns and criminals and focusing on the real criminals actually misses the point when it comes to violence against women, when it comes to spousal abuse. And so you were mentioning that earlier, and I wanted to respond to that because, you know, I think there's this sort of misassumption or misguided idea that spousal abuse is also not a crime, and it is very much a crime. And it happens in 1 in 4 families across this country. So what you're pointing to are opportunities to actually improve the registry.
So by having perhaps shelters would be a good idea.
You're pointing to gaps in the register that could actually be improved upon. Why would we want to, in a modern day society, actually get rid of a tool that is actually used in investigations, that actually could save money when it comes to the health system, when it comes to the social service system, when it comes to all the various systems that, and so one of the numbers, because we've been talking about a lot of numbers, one of the numbers that's been assessed in terms of the cost of violence against women or just violence in society is there's at least in the health system there's over $1 billion that's spent annually. And so if it is very difficult to actually identify a prevention and the cost of prevention, but you could actually do that.
Let me hear from John and then the chief.
Okay. You've said we spent this money. The money is only half spent. We've only got half the guns. You got the easy ones. You've got 7 million guns in the system. By RCMP and import-export records, we know there are at least 13.5 million guns in the country. You got the easy ones registered. Long guns, yes. So where there's 7 million mystery guns out there, you're not going to get those. And those are the ones you need to be concerned about, because guess what? By definition, they are now in criminals' hands. So the money to go and get those guns is atrocious. Once again, spend the money on chasing the people, the bad guys, not us.
Chief.
Yeah, I want to be really clear that it's with respect to bridging this rural-urban divide. The Canadian police services, both the associations and the chiefs, are not anti-gun. And we're certainly not trying to harass duck hunters and farmers. They're our fellow citizens. And I have to tell you, there are very many people in my profession who are duck hunters and firearm owners. I've carried a firearm my entire adult life. I'm not anti-gun, but I am very much for responsible gun ownership. And I think it's a price we ask all of our citizens to pay to incur a small cost, and it should be done as efficiently and economically as possible. Some inconvenience, but it should be as the minimal inconvenience. It should be done in a respectful way. The registration system can be respectful of all firearm owners, duck hunters, farmers, people in rural Canada and urban Canada. I believe the registration system can be improved. I believe it's a very effective tool. It can be made more effective. It'll be made more effective if more people comply.
Let me put that to Greg.
And I believe more people will comply if we can address the legitimate concerns that sport hunters and rural persons and farmers and duck hunters have with respect to the registration system. I think we need to work on that.
Okay,
I think a little respect on both sides would help.
Greg, if the whole thing were handled more respectfully, if it were more convenient, if it were less onerous, could you go along?
Well, let me quote the chief of police from Abbotsford, BC, who last week said, "We're having the wrong debate here. 90% of the firearms that are used to commit crimes in his jurisdiction are smuggled in from Washington State. That's a problem. That has nothing to do with long guns. We're aiming euphemistically, at the wrong target. We are not the problem. Long gun owners are not the problem. And I want to clear something up because, you know, we're having this discussion about rural-urban splits here tonight. There is probably, for non-firearms owners, a real misconception about what exactly C-391, this bill that we're all focused on, will do. It will scrap the long gun registry for non-restricted long guns. Prohibited long guns, restricted long guns will still be required to register. And let's
What
point
percentage would that catch then?
I have not the famous
9%, 9.1 to be exact.
Regardless, we have had
9.1% of the guns would still have to be registered or not have to?
No, of the long guns.
Of the long ones.
Yeah.
And let me point out something else here. We've had a handgun registry, as you pointed out in your opening, since 1934 in this country. How's that working for us? We've had 167, or 169, pardon me, gun incidents this year just in the city of Toronto alone. I'd like to ask the chief, and maybe he can tell me, and I don't know, I'm not being smart here, I don't know. How many of those were long guns?
Actually several, but not, certainly the problem in urban Canada, in some of my downtown urban neighborhoods, is a long gun problem, or a handgun problem, excuse me, a handgun problem. Those handguns, about 70% are being smuggled in. About 30% of them are being stolen or otherwise diverted from legal gun owners. But you know, you say, how's it working? How's the firearm registration system working? You earlier made allusion to a number of US states. 30,000 people lost their lives to firearms last year in the United States.
The states is a continuum of many small spots.
30,000.
That's a different culture.
And yet,
They're completely different culture.
If you look at it, I agree. I agree.
Hang on, one at a time.
Chief, faster than Canada.
But you know, I think there's an important statement, if I hate to read to you, but it says, guns cannot be divided neatly into two categories, those that are dangerous and those that are not dangerous. All guns are capable of being used in crime. All guns are capable of killing and maiming. It follows that all guns pose a threat to public safety, and as such, their control falls under the criminal law power. That was the Supreme Court of Canada that said that. That's not a couple of cops. It's not a few advocates. It's not a politician. It's the Supreme Court of Canada.
Who do not make the laws in Canada.
But they interpreted the laws as they exist.
Oh, they do. That's a whole different show. We do that.
The other point, Steve, that I wanted to make is that through the lens of violence against women, and which is why the YWCA Canada is at the table on this issue, is that for rural women in Canada whose voices are actually silent in this debate, because normally they don't come forward, and that is why we're speaking up in terms of the issues that they're bringing forward, possibly. So the reason why I think it's important is because when women are being threatened or intimidated in the home, or even killed by their intimate partners, it's the long guns that's doing that. It's the long guns that's actually doing that. But since the registry has been in place, that the number of women killed by long guns has really significantly been reduced.
Let me put that to John.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, we've heard your points tonight, and you've made them forcefully and with passion. This issue that Paulette brings up has been an awful stain on the history of this country, you know,
there
for
are
a long, long
32,000
time.
violence attacks against women each year.
So my question is for you guys who are on your side of the debate.
And gals.
Guys is a generic term. Do you have to bring a kind of an added degree of sensitivity to it, given that we know that more often than not, it's going to be a woman somewhere who's going to get killed by someone getting angry with a long gun? That's the way it works.
Well, if you look at the numbers, and again, it is a numbers game. There are some 32,000 assaults or violent assaults against women each year in Canada, of which 34 result in death, of which approximately 13 are using a firearm, of which how many are registered? None. Again, the registry doesn't work. We're spending the money on the wrong thing. Let's get the violent offenders. Let's put them in jail. Let's have shelters, phone numbers you can call, places you can go. That's where you actually have some impact. And again, I've got a daughter, as I mentioned. Do you think I want her unsafe out there?
Oh, and she shoots, right? Hang on,
and she shoots, right.
Just tell me about your daughter.
She's in university.
How old is she?
She's 20.
She shoots?
She shoots.
For how long?
Competitive handguns since she was 8 years old. Rifles and
She knows how to use a gun?
Absolutely.
Shotgun?
She doesn't like shotgun, a little bit too much recoil for her.
Okay, so what does she use?
A Glock and a 10-folio stock 2.
Is it registered?
Of course.
Just checking. Just checking.
Of course.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
because
again,
I'm the good guy.
You know,
I obey the law.
And let me tell you, Steve, that the overwhelming majority of firearms owners in this country are responsible people. And we want to encourage that in all firearms owners, because responsible gun ownership is an important component of public safety.
Paulette, do you? I mean, I want to get your sense.
Doing it.
Hang on.
That's the thing. He
No,
seems like
I'm
I'm cooperating.
And I hear you. What I want to get a sense of here is whether or not you two are just kind of speaking different languages tonight. You are talking about safety. He's talking about freedom. You're talking about violence against. Okay, but hang on. You're talking about violence against women. You're talking about
Violence.
but you're talking about inconvenience and that kind of thing as well.
I'm not talking about inconvenience.
Well, you have mentioned that tonight.
No, I haven't. He has.
Hang on. I asked you half an hour ago, is one of the reasons you want this thing gotten rid of because it's
It's a minor
inconvenient?
factor. The main thing is it doesn't work.
Okay, so are you two talking a different language tonight, and that's why you're never going to agree at the end of the day?
But we should agree. We all want a safe society. That's what's critical here. The gun owner is the natural partner of the police. We are their allies. We should not be fighting.
Well,
that's what's so sad.
Well, the thing is, but the police are the experts in terms of
Not in this case,
what
no.
what safety tools are, as well as what helps an investigation.
They're misguided.
It's very difficult for me to believe that all the police chiefs and forces across the country would be misguided.
Let me try this with the chief. We have in this society a finite amount of tax dollars and resources to put towards whatever it is we want to put it towards.
Yep.
The government of Jean Chrétien, in its wisdom, decided that it wanted to put, pick your number, $1, $2 billion, whatever, to set this thing up. A lot of money poorly spent, and the annual upkeep on doing it. That was the way they decided to spend their time, resources, and dollars. Would it have been better? Could it still be better if we directed that money in a different way?
Let me put that in context. The government recently had a program where they put $400 million into putting extra police officers on the street. In Toronto, that meant 38 officers. $400 million meant 38 additional officers in the city of Toronto.
Not much in other
A $4 million expense would mean 1/3 of an officer in Toronto. If my choice is between putting 1/3 of a person on the streets of Toronto or providing 5,600 police officers with information that they're going to use every day to do their jobs, to be safe when they're doing their jobs, to help keep our citizens safe, then that's an exceptionally good investment.
It's a wise allocation.
There's good value. There's good value. There's a great return on that investment. Now, some money may have been wasted. I make no excuse for that. But I do talk about what's contemporary, what we're doing today. And the investment that the Government of Canada is making into maintaining a firearms registry and the information that it provides to law enforcement right across this country, in rural communities and in urban communities, is money well spent. It provides police officers with information they're using. It also helps us prosecute. Several thousand times a year, they send us affidavits with information from the registry that we use to prosecute gun crimes. You take that information away, we lose those prosecutions.
Less than 4 minutes to go, Greg.
If half the guns in this country are not in the registry system, it's not the great panacea that the chief is portraying it to be. But let me try to answer your question about what if we had spent it on something different. We have a problem in our urban areas in particular with gangbangers using illegal handguns to shoot randomly on the streets. We've seen it time and time again, the Jane Crebas and everything else that has happened, where families are suffering tragedies because their people, their sons, their daughters, mothers, fathers, brothers are in the wrong spot at the wrong time, and there's indiscriminate gunplay on the cities. The chief himself mentioned earlier the fact that 70% of the firearms are smuggled illegally into this country. Why in God's name does it not make more sense, if we're talking about community safety, if we're talking about saving lives, does it not make more sense to direct the money that's being spent on a registry that is the subject of so much contention, is got inconsistencies and inaccuracies in it, and the RCMP said that right in their own report, and spend it instead on guns and gangs task forces, on spending it on programs like the City of Baltimore or Virginia's Project Exile, on spending it on more women's shelters, on
youth programs,
on more programs for youth violence or suicide prevention or anything else like that.
Chief, what about that?
Yeah, 2 points. First of all, the #1 user of the firearms registry in the Toronto Police Service is my Guns and Gangs unit. It's the largest guns and gangs unit in the country. It's an integrated unit involving police services right across Southern Ontario, and they're the #1 user of the registry.
Criminals don't register guns.
They use it in their criminal investigations every single day, and they are the strongest advocates in my service for its retention. I think as well, just because the registry doesn't solve every violence problem that we have does not mean it's not a valuable tool.
Was it worth the effort, though?
I believe it is, and I believe the fact that we have seen reductions in violence, domestic violence. It's also important to notice.
I'm sorry.
A lot of the gun advocates point to violent crime, gang violence in some of our large urban centers, and it certainly is a challenge in the City of Toronto. But the crime severity index, the amount of gun violence, the amount of violence that takes place is actually much lower in the City of Toronto than it is in many rural communities across Canada.
Got a minute left. 30 here, 30 here. Go ahead, Paul.
There is a direct correlation between when the registry was established in 1995 to modern day times, 2009, that says that since the registry has been in place, less women have been killed by long guns and rifles.
And
we attribute it directly to the
registry.
existence of the registry.
Okay. The
It's
registry
effective.
came into existence, it was passed in '95, which is why they picked that number. It came into effect in 2003. The numbers have been dropping since 1970. It's demographics. Guess what? Crime is a young person's game. Society is aging. That's what it is. It's got nothing to do with the gun registry. It's training programs that came through the '70s, safe storage drops, but guess what? The murder rate's gone up since 2002. I guess it's not working so good now. We're wasting our money on the registry, not fighting real crime, and that's a shame.
I want to thank all four of you for coming in tonight for what we knew would be a tricky but still very necessary debate to have in light of the vote that's going to be taking place in our Parliament on the 22nd of September. Thanks so much to Chief Bill Blair from Toronto Police Services, Paulette Senior from YWCA Canada, Greg Farrant, Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, John Evers, Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Thanks so much to all of you.
Pleasure. Thank you.